Hey, Heather.
Hello, hello, good morning.
Good morning. We're so excited to have you here. We're going to have you and the team doing our second presentation for the day, but super excited. Just wanted to give you a quick mic check.
Yes, perfect. I'm excited.
Awesome. Peter, how are you today?
Got my heart pumping. There's no Zoom link in my calendar this morning.
Oh, no. Well,
I know.
Well, I'm glad that you found us because you're
It took
one
me a
of
minute.
our most regulars. EB, how are you doing? Good morning.
I'm good, Bobby. I just came off another NPR interview about pandemic pets and family members. So hoping I didn't totally mutilate the message, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I find that hard to believe. So what's the angle that they're trying to take and how did you pivot it, Dr. Berliner?
They're talking primarily about pandemic pets, but one of my agendas was obviously to dismiss the idea that people are dumping more animals at pets, but instead talk about what are the actual dynamics. And then also to really look at how companion animals are family members. And so a big piece of it was on that kind of human animal bond and what that means going forward as we continue to fight the pandemic and then try to move back into whatever happens next.
Sounds amazing. Be sure when that link drops, if you're around next week, we'd love to have you drop it in the chat so we can all check it out.
Yeah, I might do that. I might hide.
I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. All right, folks, it is 8:02 Pacific Standard Time. My name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Pilot Director. Always so honored to be co-facilitating this call and hanging out with y'all on a Monday morning. So thank you so much for joining us. If you are new to this call, we'd love if you use the chat just to say hello. We know who you are and where you're from. But my favorite part of the week is tossing it over to Mary Smith for a little bit of motivation on this Monday.
Thanks, Bobby. Good morning, everybody. It's so awesome to see you all. So my colleague, Gabrielle Chapman, sent me this article that I'd love to read to you guys this morning. But before I do that, I just want to remind you that if you are in need of some major inspiration and are really interested in having your mind blown, tomorrow, Dr. Lila Miller is going to be on our Candid Conversations. And this woman is literally a national treasure for animal welfare. All of the animals that all of you have been able to save for all of the time that you've been in animal welfare, basically we can draw a line from their lives to Dr. Miller and the amazing work that she has done in shelter medicine to pioneer the kinds of techniques that we use in shelters that safeguard you as well as the animals in your care. And what this woman has experienced is just unbelievable. And yet she continues to persevere and to help us as we go forward on our journeys. So I would encourage you all to take the time tomorrow to hear her. It's definitely a once in a lifetime experience. All right, so here's what was shared with me yesterday. Sometimes I just wanted to stop. Talk of COVID, looting, brutality. I lose my way. I become convinced that this new normal is real life. Then I meet an 87-year-old who talks of living through polio, diphtheria, Vietnam protests, and yet is still enchanted with life. He seemed surprised when I said that 2020 must be especially challenging for him. No, he said slowly, looking me straight in the eyes. I learned a long time ago to not see the world through the printed headlines. I see the world through the people that surround me. I see the world with the realization that we love big. Therefore, I just choose to write my own headlines. Husband loves wife today. Family drops everything to come to grandma's bedside. And he patted my hand. Old man meets new friend. His words collide with my worries, freeing them from the tether I'd been holding tight. They float away. I am left with a renewed spirit and a new way to write my own headlines. So I would encourage all of you today to go out there and write your own headlines and think of the people you love and the people that are closest to you and focus on their happiness and what you can do to support that. So with that, I'm out. Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, Mary. And please give a huge shout out and some love to Gabby for us as well, because she really is a star in this field. And we want to make sure that she always feels honored for the support that she provides all of us. All right, folks, we have two amazing speakers that we're going to be coming up today. But before we do that, we did want to make a little bit of time for any other national updates. And again, if you are new to this call and you want to unmute and say hello, you're welcome to do that now. So I will mute and see if there are any national updates.
Hi, Bobby. I will share for Maddie's Fund that the Open Arms Challenge registration begins today, and it's through August 30th, so a week of registration. So Amber, Eby, and I are taking the portal questions and any technical assistance that we might be able to provide for the week. The challenge is all about opening our hearts and minds to more accessible and inclusive practices. So the challenge period will be from November 22nd through January 3rd, but just wanted to get that out there. If you have any questions, please give us a call or email.
Thanks, Sareen.
Hey everybody, it's Kathy from Canada. Humane Canada's got like a pile of stuff going on right now. So the Summit for Animals mini event is September 15th, and that is the impacts of climate change on animal welfare. I'll drop the link in the chat for that. As well, the call for abstracts for the main summit, which will be happening in May of 2022, and it's going to be a hybrid, some in person, some virtual. The call for abstracts to present at that is now open, and I'll pop that in the chat too. So thanks very much. Hope to see you all.
Thanks, Kathy. And Kathy is our international accountability police. Even if we say something like this is a US thing, she corrects us. So shout out to the student from Brazil in the chat as well, Kathy. So stepping up our international game. Hey, Jesse, you want to unmute and tell us about the amazing apprenticeship opportunity?
Sure, thank you. I apologize, I don't have my camera on. My computer's having issues this morning. But I also have a little bit of a cold, so you probably don't want to look at me anyway. I'm with Sixa Pet Adoption Center. We're in kind of Southwest Ohio region, but we are offering a virtual Safe Pets apprenticeship. We did one earlier this year. We're advertising for our second cohort and taking applications. So basically, if you're an organization who's looking to start a safe pets type program, safety net fostering, it's called various things. We're doing a virtual apprenticeship where we're sharing our program documents, our experiences, how we have ours set up. We're taking about 8 organizations, and initially we were asking people to apply by the 20th, but we're taking a few last minute applications probably through like middle of the week. So the website's in the chat, check it out. I can put my email address in there as well, so you can email me if you have questions. Thanks, Bobby.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I would love if you dropped your email in the chat. That would be wonderful.
Sure.
All right, folks. Well, thank you all for sitting by, listening to our national updates, welcoming new members, and listening to that blessing that Mary gave us a little earlier. But let's get it kicked off into our first presentation. I know many of you often see our good friend Peter Wolf from Best Friends Animal Society, who is a research and policy analyst on this call, just sort of being one of our cat gurus. But he wears many hats, one of which is also with the National Feline Research Council. And as we move to a movement that really strives to be evidence-based and derived in data, we want to make sure that we're getting all the information that we can. So I'm going to toss it over to Peter Wolf to share about an awesome organization.
Thanks, Bobby, and thank you for the opportunity to present. We're going to get the drama right out of the way. That's where I try to share my screen, and things tend to go sideways. Let's see if everyone can see. Share presentation. We're good. Whew, man, I should just stop now. I did the hard part. All right. All right, let's see here. Just see if I can move these guys. There we are. All right. As Bobby said, the focus really of the National Feline Research Council is to provide evidence-based arguments, if you will, for shaping policies that will lead to more life saving for cats. And of course, now, let's see, there we go. That's the slide. There we go. Kudos to National Canine Research Council. I imagine a lot of folks are familiar with that organization. We got the name from NCRC, obviously, with their permission. We're not related to NCRC, but the mission is very much the same. Again, is to provide, to help shape evidence-based policy around these various issues. So in FRC, you can see the website here. You can see the mission at the bottom: to compile, analyze, and disseminate rigorous scientific research relevant to the efficient management of free-roaming cats. And specifically, and you'll see, I'll link back to some of this later in the presentation, to these issue briefs, but briefly what the NFRC website consists of. The research library is kind of the core of it. So you've got the fast facts, which are kind of FAQs, right, as the name would imply. You've got research snapshots, and those are sort of bite-sized snapshots of specific research papers, aimed more, honestly, more at academics. The issue briefs are what we really focus on for policymakers and the media and others. And this is where we take a general topic like public health or cat welfare and distill all the relevant science down to the key findings. And again, we'll link back to that in a little bit, and this will make a little bit more sense. Who is NFRC? As Bobby mentioned, I'm one of the board members. There's 5 others, and you can see the degrees held by the board members reflect how diverse our training, our experience is with this issue. This is, you can imagine, if the board were made up entirely of animal welfare professionals, we wouldn't have the credibility that we do by having this sort of diversity of training and experience. Why do we need NFRC? Again, we know this, and certainly if you've listened to presentations from Dr. Levy, Dr. Hurley, from Daniel Bays or Monica Frendon, you know that cats are still being killed 2 to 1 in US shelters. Thankfully, TNR, Return to Field, whatever we want to call these programs, are transforming the way shelters do business. However, there are still obstacles. Lots of misinformation persists, and this can be a significant barrier. And what I'd like to tell folks, especially folks in shelters, is if this hasn't come up, it may be just a matter of time before it does come up. And when this misinformation lands in the lap of policymakers, say your city council members or staff and volunteers, the media, the general public, this can be a real headache. And so kind of the central premise of what we do at NFRC is it's so much easier to discuss and to debate the issues, right? It's public policy, we would expect some debate there. But if we're all starting with the same set of facts, it's a much, I don't know if I would say easier debate, but it's what you expect. You can make logical arguments, you can agree to disagree about certain things. If, however, a lot of upfront energy has to go into myth busting and untangling all the misinformation, it's just a much heavier lift and frankly, much more frustrating. So about that misinformation, and I'm just going to zip through a few quick examples sort of to illustrate, here's what gets out there. And again, now imagine if a city council member, if you're executive director, if your board members, if the media, if they see this before they get the facts straight, how much more difficult it would be to, say, implement a return to field program or SNR program. So this, and I was going to put this in quotes because you see this almost verbatim, these exact words cited over and over again by folks who don't even know what they're referring back to. Even well-fed cats hunt. And if you go back to the original paper from 1976, before many of the folks on this call were born, actually, what you find is it didn't really have anything to do with the real world. For one thing, these were cats that were deprived of food for 47 hours. Don't recommend doing this at home. There will be a mutiny. In this case, though, they were in a lab. There could be no mutiny. They were in these 35 square foot enclosures. As the cat begins to eat, finally, after 2 days of not being fed, a rat is placed in the enclosure. And in most cases, the cat left its food, attacked and killed the rat, and then returned to eating their food. Not relevant, obviously, to the real world at all. And also, again, the cats were not well fed. They weren't hunting in any real sense of that word. And in fact, the original author made this point in the original paper. But again, those words, even well-fed cats hunt, and you can put it in quotes and do a Google search, and you will find it's often brought up by folks opposed to TNR. And again, they don't necessarily know where it's coming from. But when this is part of a larger argument to, again, city council, or it shows up in an opinion piece in the local paper, then you find yourself backpedaling, right? And in fact, it has little to do with the real world at all, and why you would do a return to field program or a TNR program. So this is why NFRC puts out issue briefs like this one, wildlife impacts. And if you print this out, it's like 2 to 3 pages, I think. So brief, bite-sized, easily understood summary of what is the relevant science on this particular topic. Second example, this has got to be one of my favorites. This is referred sometimes in the biology literature as this landscape of fear, the idea that even the presence of cats can have negative impacts on wildlife. And what the researchers did in this case is they used 2 models. They had a cat, a gray squirrel, and an adult rabbit. They placed them on the ground about 6 feet away from trees where blackbird nests were located. And then they recorded what are the reaction from the blackbird parents to the presence of these models. And they found, not surprising, right? Alarm calling, and in this case, more alarm calling in response to the cats. Some of the nests were abandoned entirely. The parents reduced the amount of food brought to the nest. And in the case of the cat model, there was no evidence that this changed after 90 minutes. So looks like bad news for the baby blackbirds, right? And again, this is the mere presence of a cat, different from the mere presence of a squirrel or a rabbit. Until you look at the paper and you find out the models were taxidermy mounts. These are not even real cats, right? The takeaway here apparently is even dead cats can harm wildlife, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure what this was. The one, I only found out the second of the 2 models was actually a plush toy. I found out when I contacted the researcher. This was research out of the UK, so at least US and Canadian taxpayers did not pay for this kind of research, right? Hard to imagine it even gets funded. More importantly, what is the empirical evidence? So if this is the case, and by the way, in the UK, outdoor cats are the norm, not like in the US and Canada. If this is the norm, certainly this would show up in the blackbird data that they've been measuring for decades in the UK. But if we look at that data available online, you'll find out that when this study was done, this was a great recovery of blackbird populations in the UK. They were at their highest numbers in about 30 plus years when the study was done. And that's that vertical bar that you see around 2011. If you look at nest failure rate, and again, the idea of the study was the parent birds abandon the nest, and so it fails. Failure rate was one of the lowest when this study was done. So again, the empirical evidence actually conflicts directly with what the paper is saying, but the authors didn't even look at the empirical evidence to try to explain why these seemingly contradictory findings could possibly make sense together. So again, we have, NFRC has this wildlife impacts issue brief to kind of go through all the relevant science. But again, you can imagine if someone referred to that previous study in, say, a city council meeting, you've got some explaining to do, right? Better that they find the facts first. Third example, the last one about rabies transmission rates. This is a quote from the book, 2016 book, Cat Wars, talking about since 1988, cats have been the #1 domesticated species passing rabies infections to humans. And this is really important, passing infection to humans, because from a public health standpoint, we're not so much concerned about rabies in cats. I mean, that's an animal welfare issue, obviously. We're concerned about transmission to humans. If you look at the data compiled by CDC going back to 1975 through 2018, though, you find that there's all these other factors in here. Anyone have a guess? And I can't see the chat, so Bobby's going to have to, I'm putting Bobby on the spot here to field. Don't worry, Bobby. No one's going to know this. What is that 7 of 115? What could that possibly be? not zombies. What could that possibly be? No one's going to know. It's transplants. So next time someone says you can't do your SNR program because of rabies, tell them you can't do transplants because of rabies. You can't do organ transplants. That's the bigger threat, right? Which is crazy. This is a completely strange situation. They harvested organs from someone who had passed away. They didn't know this individual was infected with rabies. Complete weird nightmare medical case, right? But the point being, cats are not the threat they're made out to be. That quote from Cat Wars is demonstrably false. And in fact, so this one case of cats, this is 1975. To find the next most recent, you would actually have to go back to 1960, right? So that, again, that puts things in perspective, right? And oh, by the way, but these programs, these TNR programs, SNR programs, are sterilizing and vaccinating these cats. So they're actually, you know, a public health benefit. So again, brings us back to NFRC, the research library. We've got an issue brief all about public health, again, to get this out there in an easily digestible format for the media, for public policy folks, for anybody actually. So how can NFRC help you? Again, we have these materials out there to be shared as widely as possible. So you could put a link on your website, you could share the materials directly. You don't have to worry about getting permission, say, for example. Again, the premise of the whole thing is easier to have these conversations, public debates, if everyone's got the same facts in front of them. And again, especially Dr. Berliner mentioned about talking to the media, talking to NPR earlier. I mentioned in the chat, talking to the media always makes me nervous. This kind of information can be a great help if and when you have to talk to your local media. You can also, at the NFRC site, you can sign up for newsletters and future updates. How can you help NFRC? You might remember if you were on the call a couple of weeks ago, April Huntsman was on the call talking about the importance of SEO and really getting our websites in order. One thing I don't think she mentioned was one way to raise the organic search for websites is to have credible links coming in. So having shelters, municipal shelters, especially pointing to NFRC helps raise our credibility in the eyes of Google. And that means people are going to find us more readily than if we didn't have those links in. So that's an enormous help. And with that, I realized I was very quick. Any questions? Anyone nervous about getting an organ transplant?
That was amazing. You're right. Nobody was going to guess that. Peter, thank you so much. I think we absolutely have time to unpack this conversation because one, I think this is great data and great information, but two, I think there's also organizations on here that have been dealing with this from the communication side. I mean, I see Stacy from San Diego. I see Monica here, who is one of our national cat experts. So Monica, do you have thoughts? Stacy, do you have thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts. I always have lots of thoughts on cats. I'm so grateful to Peter and the work that goes on at the Research Council because Peter and I and the other cat advocates on this call too, we spend a lot of time debunking these myths all the time. Peter and I are well known to kind of get into it online with some of these folks from time to time. But I guess my question to Peter would be, what can the average cat advocate do to kind of start dispelling some of these old myths that are really sabotaging the good work that we're trying to do, especially as we reimagine sheltering and embrace these HOS models of supporting cats where they are in the community? How do we reach, how does the average shelter worker, cat advocate, volunteer, caretaker, how do we start dispelling all these myths that are perpetuating bad things for cats?
Yeah, good question. So I think one of the easiest ways, honestly, is, and you kind of alluded to this about like the online conversations can get pretty nasty and volatile. And I'm talking about it's next door, it's Facebook, it's the local media takes it up, or someone writes a letter to the editor. And before you know it, again, it gets pretty nasty. The idea here is, and I do this myself, is I'll do a Google search. And if they're talking about it in some community, I'll interject with a link to NFRC, very diplomatically, very, like, actually, again, if I wanted to correct the rabies, issue or whatever like this, point to that issue brief, pull a quote right out of it if I want, like whatever. That I think in some ways is the easiest way. It's just, and it takes the individual kind of out of the conversation, and maybe it's not going to be as volatile in that case to say like, look, this isn't me saying this. This is National Feline Research Council, says this. So I think that's an easy way for folks to weigh in. And again, the premise of NFRC is arm the folks who need, I hate to use the kind of militarized terms, but arm the folks who need the ammunition, right? It's a two militarized terms in the same sentence, but you get the idea, is provide, that's the value we provide, is you're not going to go, I don't wish it on anyone to go digging around in these papers, right? Unless you're an insomniac, don't go digging around the papers. We've done that for you. And again, it's made to be easily understood. We take out all the academic jargon and all the rest of it and make it so that if you wanted to point a local reporter to this site, they have something they can use. And again, it's this, just the facts. And again, you saw who's on National Feline Research Council in terms of their bios. I don't get to make this a best friends thing, because my colleagues will smack me around. Like, again, if you look, it's not like my own blog, let's put it that way. There's no snark, there's none of that allowed. It's a very evidence-based, easily digested. Again, if you go there, you'll see. I don't know if that answered your question, Monica.
Yeah, I think what I heard was, when people are causing you trouble, send a link and let y'all put the intellectual smackdown on them. That's what I heard, Peter Wolf.
And I will tell you, you might get flagged. I've been flagged numerous times by Facebook saying like, this does not meet our community standards. This looks like spam. And I think it's somebody else who doesn't like what I'm saying, flagging it as spam. So just a warning, like you might end up in Facebook jail.
So there is another question from Kimberly Jones in the chat. Says, we are so far TNRing for cat caretakers, but we are going to start to tiptoe into returning stray cats. Who is already doing this? So if anybody wants to speak up, or Peter, if you have thoughts.
All the cool kids are already doing this, right? Like that's, yeah. It is, and Dr. Hurley points this out all the time, is this is fast becoming the norm, right? Is to do these, again, whatever we want to call them, return to field, shelter to return, whatever we want to call that, shelter-based TNR, that is becoming the norm. It is no longer kind of a fringy, experimental, that's becoming the norm. And again, we've got an issue brief for that, explaining here are the benefits, here's why folks would do that. And that can be used to help talk to city council, county commissioners, your staff, your volunteers, whomever it might be. But I don't know how we are on time, Bobby, but I'd love to hear from someone in a shelter who is doing it, and maybe especially who made that transition recently.
I love it. We absolutely have time. Linda, I saw you raise your hand.
Oh, no, we recently switched from euthanizing the feral cats to doing TNR very, very recently. And it was about a year whenever the coordinator that we had before, she retired, and then that's where I stepped in. So we have a new CAO as well. So we're both kind of on this page here. So.
Peter, do you get into, do you have an issue briefing online about birds and ecology, and another way for us to cite back to the Research Council when we get the, pushback from conservation on potential harm from cats?
There is and if I can find it quickly, I'll put it in the window. There is an issue brief about wildlife impacts specifically. And that, if I remember correctly, that was maybe the first one we did, knowing that tends to be the what gives folks the most heartburn, and understandably so, right? So yes, I'm gonna find that and pop it in the chat window real quick. Yes, we've got that. And by the way, if you go to the site and you take a look around through those issue briefs, if there's something you see missing, please let me know. And that, that could indicate that there's something, I mean, it's evolving, there's more content coming. So please let us know if there's something, say like, here's what I'm hearing, I don't see anything here to help me. That's when we make it, is again, that's the whole premise of the thing. So please let me know.
Hey, Peter, is there a list of some sort of consolidated list of all the agencies or many agencies around the country that do have neighborhood or community cat, TNR, SNR programs?
Ooh, not that I'm aware of. I wish there were. I absolutely wish there were. I know Alley Cat Allies has put out a map of specifically to local ordinances that have shifted over the years or whatever. I'd love to see something similar. And I think Dr. Levy or Dr. Hurley maybe put out something related to SNR, like a Google map that had dots on there or something. Monica might remember, but we absolutely need something like that, so that, as you know, like the debate often makes it sound like this is some fringy thing that's unproven, and that is absolutely not the case. Again, if you're a city council member, you have lots of issues. You don't know this issue. And it would be some comfort to say, this is generally accepted, this is considered best practices, and we're doing it too. Okay, that sounds pretty low stress, right?
Well, shout out to Stacy LeBaron for this awesome resource and also the host of the Community Cat podcast. Stacy, do you have thoughts on this? We have a couple more minutes. I'd love to hear from you as well.
Oh, thanks. Well, Peter, great stuff today. And yeah, in terms of conveying information, my thoughts are always about whether we are conveying our information from top down. So a lot of these folks who are in the room are part of organizations, and we're looking for ways to send information out sort of from the top down and work with community leaders and, housing association places. And I also work with the bottom up. So we're working one-on-one with individuals who are learning to do TNR on their own and have it be sort of neighbor to neighbor information like, oh, I got my 10 cats down to 2 cats and, it was really easy to do. You just had to do blah, blah, blah. So, just trying to convey the information from 2 different ways and seeing how they can dovetail together and work collaboratively rather than conflicting, because I know from the trapper side of things, the individual trappers are like, well, why am I not able to bring these cats into the shelter? Why am I not? So that there's there can be conflicts, and we're trying to find peace between those 2 populations. Right, Peter? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And as you say, a consistency in messaging. I mean, to be clear, the framing is going to be different probably if you're talking to city council versus your neighbor, but the facts don't change, right? So yeah, there needs to be consistency. And as you say, and they're both, I don't know if you could say equally as important, but they're both important. You can have the top down, and if the neighbors aren't on board, great, you've got an ordinance, but and vice versa. You can have all the neighbors on board and there's an ordinance that makes it difficult. That's not helpful either.
Absolutely. Look at all these feline rock stars on this call today. So excited to have this conversation. I think the last thing that I will leave you with as well, with just my own experience, I see Philip Zimmerman from the city of Sacramento here as well, one of my old amazing bosses. And one thing that he has been great at is really developing, cultivating relationships with the leadership, right? The city manager, the council's office, because to them, we are the experts, right? And so they're going to come to us to look for resources and support. And when we can refer them to our peers at the National Feline Research Council, all we're doing is helping connect the dots and making sure we're moving life-saving forward. So Peter, again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to stay on the topic of community-based concepts, community-based things, community-based programs. But I know the big conversation is always, how do we track it? How do we make sure we can tell our story about what we're actually doing, not within our shelter walls, but outside of our shelter walls? So I'm super excited. I'm going to be introducing Heather Duncan from the growth team of Shelter Love. She has a star-studded cast from Memphis Animal Services with her. So Heather, I'm going to toss it over to you to take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bobby. And also thank you, Peter, for your fantastic presentation. So as Bobby mentioned, I'm Heather with Shelter Love, and I will be presenting today with Alexis, who is the director of Memphis Animal Services. They're waving. And also with Sherry and Courtney from Memphis's Pet Resource Center team. So after Alexis had previously mentioned that they were using Shelter Love to track their community services, we got tons of requests for a quick demo of how this free Shelter Love tool works and how people are using it. So for some quick background, for anyone who's not familiar, Shelter Love is a shelter and rescue management software used by organizations across the nation and most known for our donation boost at checkout. So we have been watching and learning from the host community, and we really saw an opportunity to help when the pandemic hit and community programs came to the forefront more than ever before. We were able to act quickly and build out features to allow organizations to more effectively track, manage, and report on all of their community services and programs, outside of their shelter walls, to have great data on that, et cetera. So of course, when it comes down to it, when it came time for this demo, it's going to make the most sense for the people who are using this platform in their day-to-day lives to be the ones who are really, showing you how they're actually using it. So without further ado, I will hand things off to Alexis, and I will share my screen and do my best to keep up.
Thank you, Heather. And while Heather's getting the screen loaded, I would just like to make one comment about Peter's presentation. One thing that I have used immensely when I talk to citizens to try to explain community cat is I use the soap opera analogy. So put this in your back pocket because it makes sense. Who is not familiar with a soap opera, right? Or remember when you would grow up and you'd watch a soap opera and all of a sudden there'd be some voice that would come across and be like, the role of Blake Carrington is now being played by, and it was some brand new actor you've never seen before. So I explain that to people. I'm like, listen, if I take that cat, all I've done is change the actor. I haven't changed the fact that the soap opera is still happening at your house. So let's stabilize it. I'm not solving your problem if I remove the cat. I'm just giving you a new actor. So who's now got to learn everything about your house. But so just a little thing that people go, oh, I know what you're talking about. So that was my 2 cents on Peter's presentation. Anyway, so what you're looking at here, Heather, thank you for pulling this up. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about sort of our journey to the Shelter Love platform. And then I'm going to turn it over to our Pet Resource Center experts, our 2 pet resource specialists, Sherry and Courtney. They're freaking fantastic, y'all. And I know you're all going to try to poach them after this, but they don't want to leave Memphis. They are here, and leave them alone. So what you're looking at here is our website. And so this is kind of a summary page about I need help with my pet and the different things we can help with and all of that. And the reason why we're starting here instead of in Shelter Love is because I want to give a bigger overview of how this all started. So like everyone else, last spring in the pandemic, we didn't have Shelter Love yet. And we were like, how do we track this? How do we keep up with the requests for help? What are we going to do here? And it was spreadsheets. Now, I love me some Excel spreadsheets, but let me promise you, it is not the most efficient way to manage this. And so when we changed to using Shelter Love as our shelter software system last summer, and then this platform, the community services platform came along, we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the solution. So let me start by how we connect with citizens here. And then Sherry and Courtney are going to talk about the case management side. So you can see here on the website, we just sort of have a basic listing of the things that we offer. And then you can call as well. We do have a dedicated phone line, but we really do try to push people to the form, to the website, and I'll explain why in a second. So there was a little link there that said, fill out this form, and it takes you to this. So look, you can see right here, we are starting the pet assistance request process. So Heather can show you, you put an email in, and look, she starts typing in her name, her address, her information, things like that. And Heather, you can just kind of keep scrolling down. You fill it out just like any form that anyone has used ever. It's very simple. Now you start putting in information about your animal. And the cool thing about this is by utilizing this form, we have now eliminated all data entry from a staff perspective. And this is automatically going to populate as a person record into Shelter Love, and it's going to auto-populate an activity, which is what we call, things that we manage through community services. So you can see here, we're getting all this done. What type of assistance do you need? And we were able to configure what those specific things are that we provide resources for. So you can see it's super simple, it's intuitive, and then it creates this case file on the back end. So look at all this detail. Where did the pet come from? And so they have these customized forms that they offer that you do for foster applications and adoptions, but you can do it for a pet assistance request. So one of the great things we've done, Heather, can we pull up our Pet Resource Center flyers before we go into the case tracking that I sent you?
Yes.
So
everyone forgive me for
fine.
figuring out.
Yeah, I'm fast. Sorry. I'm a Yankee by born and bred, so I talk real fast. But so we have these flyers that we cut up. Obviously, we cut it into threes. And we have them in English and Spanish that our officers all give out, that are available in our lobby. But you can see the key is there's this QR code, right? So rather than having someone just call the phone number and then someone has to manually pull the info, the QR code links directly to that Pet Resource Center request. So we are handing these flyers out like candy all throughout. Can you go back to the English one just so people can take a look, Heather? There you go. So, you know, all the things you need help with, scan this code with your smartphone, and it takes you right to that link, which is a great way to just sort of filter people in and save you from the manual data entry. All right, so we're now at the point where we're getting the message out there. People are filling out their forms. If they do call and leave a voicemail, we use staff on light duty to pull those calls and enter them, or volunteers. And that way we're able to leave the brilliant minds of Sherry and Courtney to do the high level work, which is work the calls, call the citizens back and start providing those resources. And so I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to turn it over to Sherry and Courtney to show you how they work cases in Shelter Love. They're going to kind of show you the filtering steps on the left, and then and you know how they manage their casework. But then we're also going to dig into how each case is worked and then show you some reporting. So Sherry, Courtney, unmute and take it away, ladies.
So can you guys hear me? Everybody can hear me? Everybody can. So, okay. Alexis has done a good job.
Alexis, real quick, Sherry and Courtney, if y'all can mute one of your
okay, no
mics.
problem. Okay, is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So Alexis has done an excellent job describing what we do here with Shelter Love. I, for one, was a fan of the spreadsheet. I just enjoyed the spreadsheet. But when she brought the idea of Shelter Love to us and we finally got it up and going, guys, it just made our jobs so much more easier. You just kind of pretty much flow through effortlessly with no issues. There's a drop box for everything. So you're just kind of clicking and filling in the information. Courtney is here in case she wants to jump in, but Heather, when you're ready, we can get started. What I normally do is I tackle all of the old calls, the oldest calls first. So yeah, we would click on oldest, and then you would just scroll down to, come on down, back where you were on the oldest side. We can just come on down to where it says, activities. And we would open up the oldest activity and see what the person is asking for.
Okay.
I want to be scrolling. Okay.
I'm going back to newest, and then I'll open these activities.
Yep.
Perfect.
And just so everybody knows, we're playing a little with this because this is a demo site that Heather's running. It's not our actual internal. She didn't want to use our data. So that's why the whole like go to oldest, go to this. Once you're in your own system, like you'll have that workflow and it's very intuitive and obvious, but we're just trying to like play in their demo site. So that's why we're a little like hitting new and stuff, but it's very easy to navigate in your site.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you for clarifying that, Alexis. That's exactly right, why I had to click back to newest.
Okay, so once we can see what the caller is asking for, the person's name, she's got 2 dogs, and FP, she's asking for food pantry assistance. So then you can also go into associations and it gives you a little bit more information, like maybe her address, email address. Once we find out what we're dealing with, we'll go into memos, and it should actually give you her actual request. And on what you're looking at here is one that we've already worked. So we've got Birdie Oldner. She's got 2 dogs and she's requesting food pantry for both of her dogs. We've got her address. This is a setup that we use here for our delivery guys. Our animal control officers normally deliver food if people are requesting a delivery. So we set it up like this so they'll know the person's name, they got the address. They can also have their telephone number to give the customer a heads up that they are coming with their pet food and whatever supplies they're requesting. And we also have the date that the supplies will be taken to the customer at the bottom. So once we're done with putting their information in, whatever they're needing, a lot of times we'll just give them a call ahead of time just to say, you know, this is Sherry with Memphis Animal Services. What requests or supplies are you needing? They tell us, we document it, then we can close the call out.
And for closing the call, I believe that you would come up here to click close here, correct? This is how you typically do it.
Yeah, and Courtney can see it better on her side.
So on that one, it would be complete for that one. If we leave a voicemail and we can't speak to the pet parent at that time, we would put left a voicemail in the memos. And then for the closing, we would put left voicemail instead of complete.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So everyone can see that is another option there. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close that. Great. One thing I want to add, if you don't mind, that one thing I think that has been so smart the way that Memphis has done it is their naming system. So the title of the activity is open text. You can create it, but they have come up with this really smart way of naming them. So Sherry and Courtney, do you want to describe essentially, you know, how you name them and how you use that, how your team uses that?
We just really like to have all the information up front without even having to click any of the tabs. It's very convenient when we're making phone calls every day just to have the phone number easily so you can see it easily. It just helps us, like if we're moving faster, we can do all the food pantry ones. We can see everything that we're doing. We can move on to owner surrenders or stray surrenders. It just makes more sense to have everything up front without having to click into every single activity just to see what they're requesting.
Nice. Yeah, I think that was really smart. Perfect. And on the day of the deliveries, how does your team go about the deliveries and pulling lists for who to make the deliveries to?
Well, through Shelter Love, there's a way to do it. We do it multiple different ways. The best way to do it would be to pull the report. So you'd have to go up to the name and then go down to reports. The easiest way I do it this way, before to pull up, is current activity view, and then we're gonna go to download detail report.
Perfect. And I've actually already opened one in a separate tab because I don't have Excel.
Okay. So just delete anything that isn't food pantry related, and then it would just give us a detailed report of what the officers need to deliver that day.
Perfect. Great. And I know we've been talking about food pantry, but you use this platform for all of your various community programs, correct? What are the other types of programs that are managing in here?
We medical care, spay and neuter, vaccines. We use it for owner surrenders, stray surrenders. Anything that comes through the Pet Resource Center goes into the Shelter Love.
Behaviorists, dog houses.
Yes, fence repair.
Yeah. Great. Okay, perfect. And I'm just going to go back to the main screen here. And one other thing I'd like to point out as well, your team, I believe maybe using the metrics as well, but I just wanted to show everyone that there is a way to track your various metrics in Shelter Love too. So if we go back into this activity that we have here, we can scroll down, click, you can click to edit it, but you see that we've already added some, but you can track, you know, how many cats were helped, how many dogs were helped, people, etc. And depending on the activity type, there are going to be different types of metrics available, like pounds of dog food given, pounds of cat food given, things like that as well.
Hey, Heather, there's a really great question in the chat from Karen Ward about if a client fills this form out who has previously used your services, will it connect them to their old person ID or does it create a new one?
That's a great question. So that it will connect them to their previous person ID based on their email. I believe it may be able to connect them as well on the phone number, but definitely the email.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for us that we're really pleased about is that Shelter Love requires you to do a person search before you can create a new person record. And so if there's a similar address or phone number, it's actually going to ask you, hey, we think we've already got this person in the system. Do you want to merge those records? And so to that point, I can see if that person adopted from us. I can see if that person has a court case history with us. I can see, you know, any other touch point that they've had with our organization since we switched to Shelter Love.
Great. Well, Courtney and Sherry, was there anything else that you wanted to share, or Bobby, would it be all right if we went into questions?
That would be wonderful. Alexis, I would love to start it off with a question for your team. I think what I find so amazing about you being able to track this information is the data that you were able to provide that shows how many people you're helping in the community versus how many animals that you're helping in the shelter. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a question in the chat. I just popped up a link to the PDF version of our Pet Resource Center flyers. So you can grab a copy of that if you'd like, or shoot me an email if you're interested in getting more stuff. And just on that, somebody had a question about the QR codes. So a link is great for our website. And people can click on that there. But the reason why we did the QR code on the flyers, and we actually have QR codes on our doors. We say, you know, we're doing emergency intake only. If you need to make an appointment for a pet that you found or your pet, there's QR codes on our door signs. There's QR codes on our signs outside of our facility, like at the gate entrance, because everybody's got a smartphone. So versus having a link where you have to type in like www.shelterlove.com / and you're on your phone, anybody can hold their phone up to it, like we're all doing with restaurants now, right? Like when they don't want to give you a hard copy menu because of germs and everyone's QR code scanning at the table. So we're using the QR code link everywhere because it's just such an easy touch point for citizens right at that point. But what Bobby was asking about was one of the things that I thought was really important, especially when we got some pushback since COVID from some of the animal welfare community advocates that we're just leaving animals to die and we're not helping animals. And it was like, no, we're just helping in a different way. We're not saying that intake is the only way that we help anymore, and that not every pet needs the same outcome, right? So it's not a one size fit all approach. And so what I did is I looked at our intake data from January to May in 2019. We did some owner surrender prevention, but certainly we never did anything to manage like stray intakes. We never had applied managed intake to the stray population. So when we looked at January to May intake data in 2019 and compared that with January to May intake data for 2021, we found that yes, we had taken in less animals. However, when I added into that 2021 population, the number of pets we had helped through our Pet Resource Center using this data, we found that we had actually helped 7% more animals in 2021 over the same time period. We just didn't help them all in the old one size fits all way of intake at the shelter. So you could actually be a bigger impact to your community with longer term sustainable results, as opposed to pet keeps getting out of fence, I take pet, person gets new pet gets out of fence, I take pet, person gets new pet, and that hamster wheel who's, you know, putting the babies in the river and floating them down, like stop the flow. And the way you stop that is by connecting with the citizen and working with them to help solve the core root issue that's causing the need for shelter surrender in the first place. So that's really what we're trying to do, is say, like, let's triage each case. Let's look at each case as an individual example, the same way we do in human services, right? Like not every human caseworker or social worker situation has the same outcome because there's something unique about each of them. And so that's what we're trying to employ here as well.
Thank you, Alexis. Heather, I'll ask you to stop sharing. And I think there was a really, really important conversation from Stacy just about access to technology and using QR codes. And I believe, yeah, April Huntsman, who gave that presentation on SEO, did talk about it. It was somewhere between 80 to 90% of people making under $30,000 do have access to technology. And it looks like there was a comment from Augusta about that as well. Did you want to unmute and let us know a little about the work that you do with the unhoused community?
Sorry, I just got on the phone. This is Augusta. What we do is we get a lot of times requests for help with veterinary care and also sometimes with impound fees. And I never have a problem really texting to people the coupons that we use for the vet care. And often people contact me via a phone. So it's very rare that I come across anybody that doesn't have access to a phone somehow.
Thank you so much. And I think the most important takeaway from this, besides that Memphis are a bunch of rock stars, is the question about signing up for this and if you have to have Shelter Love in order to use it. So Heather, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You do not have to use the rest of Shelter Love to be able to take advantage of this free product. You will technically have access to the sheltering side of Shelter Love as well. But if you're not processing adoptions in it, then you will not get charged. So yeah, we would love for, everyone to come check us out. I'll put my information in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to meet with you and discuss how it can work for your specific team.
Thank you so much, Heather. Alexis, I wanted to just toss to you to close. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, any information that you think is important for the folks to take away?
I would say the most important thing for people to think about is that it was not easy to figure out how in your existing complement, we're a municipal shelter. I have a set full-time complement level that is, voted on by city council. I can't just add other full-time positions. So I had to figure out how to modify my table of organization, change my org chart to be able to devote 2 full-time employees to this work. And so it took a little creativity, but let me promise to you that get 2 people in there based on your size if you can. If you can't get 2, get 1, get a part, whatever you can do, devoting people to this work. I tell my team all the time, I understand that you're like, oh, I wish I had a couple more people to help here and they're busy doing. No, this is the work that keeps the number in the shelter that you have to care for down. Like, this is the most important work, and it's going to keep cruelty cases from happening. It's going to keep all this other stuff that is downstream that we don't want to happen, because we are providing early intervention to our community and get people who don't just care about animals, get people who care about humans. Sherry and Courtney are the kindest, most caring humans. We call Sherry Mama Sherry around here. The other day it was blazing hot and Sherry went to Walmart across the street and bought like 5 cases of Powerade for our technicians for playgroup, not because anybody asked her to, but because she's just kind. And so have kind people who recognize that this is human work. This is not animal work. This is about helping humans in our community. And these 2 are rock stars. I get out of their way. I let them make good decisions. They have a ton of autonomy and it is paying off, and we're seeing it pay dividends. And thanks to Shelter Love for providing us the infrastructure to make that happen.
Alexis, it just gives me goosebumps when we have leaders that let leaders lead, So Mama Sherry, thank you. Courtney, Heather, Peter Wolf, thank you for that amazing information and resources earlier. Obviously, Alexis, thank you to you. And I'm going to toss it over to Mary Smith to close us out.
Thank you guys so much. Alexis, I don't think you have to worry about people trying to steal Mama Sherry and Courtney. I think you need to worry about people that suddenly want to move to Memphis so that they can work with you. Absolutely. You guys are amazing. Heather, Maddie's Fund has been supporters of Shelter Love for a long time. This just makes us so proud to see the great work that you are doing. And I would remind people that I think Petco Love has a grant opportunity related for organizations, smaller organizations that are interested in developing, starting to implement a software program. They might be able to help you get something like Shelter Love or Pet Point. If you don't have a system for collecting all this great information, you are going to be left behind. Don't let that happen. And Peter Wolf, you are my favorite myth buster. So once again, you have just been a rock star here. Bye, everybody. Go out and make your own headlines.